The house was silent, save for the rattling of the window panes against the Indiana wind. I sat at the kitchen table, the wood scarred from decades of family dinners that don't happen anymore. In my hand, I held the small, chilled vial of Martha's insulin. She's been gone 6 months, but the doctor said to keep it, just in case my own sugar spiked. It was the last thing we'd bought together at the Walmart pharmacy. Suddenly, the hum of the refrigerator died. The overhead light flickered once and vanished into a thick, suffocating blackness. I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, my thumb rubbing the cold glass of the medicine. I knew what had happened. I'd visited the SSA office 3 times this month, trying to tell them my pension check hadn't arrived. They told me to wait. The utility company didn't want to wait. I stood up, my knees popping like dry kindling. I reached for the rotary phone on the wall, but there was no dial tone. Disconnected. I felt a hot flash of shame wash over me. I worked 43 years at the mill. I bled for this country in the freezing hills of Korea. And here I was, 79 years old, unable to keep the lights on in the house I paid for in 1984. I heard a car pull into the gravel driveway. Headlights swept across the kitchen wallpaper. I thought it was the power company coming to realize their mistake. Maybe it was David, my son, finally returning my calls. I shuffled to the door, squinting against the glare. It wasn't the utility truck. It was a sleek, black sedan I didn't recognize. A man stepped out, silhouetted by the bright beams. He wasn't carrying a toolbox or a clipboard. He was carrying a set of handcuffs and a folded piece of paper. "Raymond Carter?" he called out, his voice cold and official. "I'm Officer Miller. I have an emergency removal order. This residence has been declared unfit for human habitation due to lack of utilities and a reported mental decline." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I'm fine," I croaked. "The check is just late. My son, David, he's supposed to handle the bills." The officer stepped onto the porch, the light hitting his badge. "Mr. Carter, your son is the one who filed the report. He says you've been hallucinating, keeping dead medication, and that you're a danger to yourself." As he reached for my arm, I looked down at the insulin vial still gripped in my hand, and then I saw the second car pulling up behind the first. It was a white van with Golden Sunset Care painted on the side. The back of the van smelled like bleach and old oranges. I didn't fight them. A Carter doesn't make a scene in the street. I sat on the bench seat, my back straight, staring at the floor mat. They hadn't even let me grab my coat. I was still in my flannel shirt, the one Martha used to say made me look like a movie star. We pulled into a facility on the edge of town. It looked like a hospital, but the windows were smaller. Golden Sunset was a lie. The sun had set on this place a long time ago. They led me into a small office where a woman with sharp, painted eyebrows sat behind a desk. Her name tag said Administrator Graves. "Mr. Carter," she said, not looking up from her screen, "your son, David, has signed the intake forms. He's been appointed your temporary guardian. He's concerned about your forgetfulness regarding the finances." "I don't forget," I said softly. "The pension check was diverted. I saw the bank statement. It went to an account I didn't recognize." Graves finally looked up. There was no pity in her eyes, just a practiced, professional boredom. "That's exactly what David said you'd say. Delusions of theft are a common symptom. We're going to put you in room 302. It's a secure wing." "Secure?" I asked. My hands started to shake. I tucked them under my thighs so she wouldn't see. "I'm a veteran. I don't belong in a locked room." "It's for your safety, Raymond," she said. She pushed a buzzer. 2 orderlies appeared. They didn't look like nurses. They looked like the guys I used to see working the heavy scrap heaps at the mill. As they led me down the hall, I passed a common room. A dozen people sat in front of a TV that was showing nothing but static. No one was talking. The air felt heavy, like the humidity before a storm in Gary. They pushed me into 302 and clicked the lock. There was a single bed, a plastic chair, and a window with a steel mesh screen. On the bedside table was a small plastic cup with 2 blue pills. "I don't take medication," I told the orderly. "You do now," he grunted. "Orders from your guardian." I sat on the bed and looked out at the parking lot. An hour later, David's car pulled in. I stood up, pressing my face to the mesh. I waited for him to come inside to tell me this was all a big mistake, but he didn't come in. I watched him meet Graves at the back of his car. He handed her a thick envelope. She handed him a set of keys. Those were the keys to my house. The blue pills made the world move like it was underwater. I didn't like it. I'd spent my whole life being sharp. In the mill, if you weren't sharp, you lost a finger. In the war, if you weren't sharp, you lost your life. Now they were trying to drown my brain in chemicals. I started spitting the pills into the drain of the tiny sink when the orderlies weren't looking. Within 2 days, the fog began to lift. That's when I noticed the details. This wasn't a care home, it was a warehouse. I saw an old woman in the hallway, Mrs. Gable. She used to work at the library. She was crying because someone had taken her wedding ring. "It was right here," she sobbed to a nurse. "I took it off to wash my hands." The nurse just kept walking. "You probably misplaced it, honey. Go back to your room." I knew better. I'd seen that same nurse whispering with a man in the parking lot earlier, handing over a small velvet pouch. This place was stripping us, not just of our dignity, but of our lives. On Friday, David finally came to visit. He looked different. He was wearing a new watch, something gold and heavy that caught the light. He sat on the plastic chair, looking at his phone more than me. "How are you feeling, Dad?" he asked. He didn't sound like my son. He sounded like a salesman. "The lights are off at home, David," I said, "and the bank said you moved the money." David sighed, a long theatrical sound. "See, this is why you're here. You keep obsessing over things that aren't true. I'm fixing the house up. It needs a lot of work. I'm thinking of selling it to cover your medical bills." "Selling it?" My voice cracked. "Your mother's things are in there. My medals, the cedar chest I built for you when you graduated." "It's just stuff, Dad," he said, standing up. "You don't need it here. Graves says you're doing better, but you still have these episodes. Just take your meds and relax." He turned to leave, but he stopped at the door. He looked back, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of the boy I used to take fishing. Then it vanished. "Oh, I found a dog in the backyard, a stray. I called animal control. You shouldn't have been feeding it anyway. It's a liability." My heart stopped. It wasn't a stray. It was Buster, the mutt Martha and I had rescued 5 years ago. He was 12 years old and blind in one eye. "David, no!" I whispered. "It's all I have left." David didn't answer. He just signaled the orderly to lock the door behind him. I didn't sleep that night. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the muffled groans of the other residents. I thought about Buster in a cold cage at the pound. I thought about Martha's dresses being thrown into a dumpster. I realized then that David wasn't waiting for me to get better. He was waiting for me to disappear. The next morning, I did something I haven't done since the day Martha died. I cried. Not a loud sob, but those hot, silent tears that burn your cheeks. I sat in the shower, letting the lukewarm water hide the sound. I felt useless, a 79-year-old man locked in a box, defeated by his own blood. But then I felt something in my pocket. I'd forgotten it was there. It was a small brass coin, my challenge coin from the 1st Marine Division. I'd carried it for 50 years. I rubbed the raised metal with my thumb. Semper Fidelis, always faithful. I wasn't dead yet. During the recreation hour, I sat near the nurse's station, acting like the pills were working. I kept my head down, mouth slightly open, looking like the hollow shell they wanted me to be. I listened. "Did you get the signature for the Carter property?" Graves was talking to the head nurse. "Not yet," the nurse replied. "The old man is stubborn, but the son said if we can't get him to sign the deed transfer, he'll just have him declared legally incompetent by Monday. The judge they use is already on board." "Good," Graves said. "I want that property liquidated by the end of the month. We need the kickback to cover the inspection fines." My blood turned to ice. It was a racket. David wasn't just stealing my money. He was part of a machine that ground up old people for parts. I looked toward the exit, a heavy steel door with a keypad. I didn't know the code. I looked at the windows, all screened. I was trapped. Just then, a young man in a gray jumpsuit walked by, pushing a cart of laundry. He had a tattoo of a bird on his neck and looked like he'd seen some trouble. He caught my eye. "You're the one from Gary, right?" he whispered, tossing a towel onto a pile. "My granddad worked the mills, said you were a legend on the floor." "I was a man who did his job," I said, my voice low and sharp. "And right now, my job is getting out of here." The laundry boy looked at the nurse's station, then back at me. "The code is the facility's zip code, but there's a guard at the gate. You won't make it a block." "I don't need to make it a block. I just need to make it to the VA." The laundry boy paused, then leaned in. "They're taking a group to the hospital for checkups in 20 minutes. It's a white bus. If you can get into that laundry bin, I can wheel you to the loading dock." The laundry bin was cramped and smelled of sour sheets, but I didn't care. I felt like a scout behind enemy lines. Every bump in the floor felt like a heartbeat. I heard the boy, his name was Leo, whistling a tune as he pushed me through the corridors. "Easy now, Mr. Carter," he muttered. "We're at the dock." I felt the bin lift slightly as he pushed it onto the hydraulic lift. Then the sound of the wind. Fresh air. I hadn't realized how much I missed the smell of Indiana rain and car exhaust. "Go," Leo whispered, tipping the bin over. I tumbled onto the asphalt, my old bones screaming in protest. I scrambled behind a stack of pallets just as the transport bus pulled up. The driver got out to smoke a cigarette. I waited, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. When the driver turned his back, I crawled toward the bus. I wasn't as fast as I used to be, but I was quiet. I slipped into the back row, huddled under a pile of discarded blankets. The bus ride felt like an eternity. We stopped at 3 different clinics. Each time I prayed they wouldn't count the passengers. Finally, we pulled into the big VA hospital in Indianapolis. When the doors opened and the other seniors began to shuffle out, I merged with them. I kept my head down until I saw the sign for patient advocacy. I walked inside, my legs shaking so hard I had to grab the counter to stay upright. "I need to speak to someone," I told the woman at the desk. "My name is Raymond Carter. I'm a Korean War veteran, and I'm being robbed." She looked at my disheveled clothes, my shaking hands, and the golden sunset ID bracelet on my wrist. I saw the look of doubt in her eyes. It was the same look I'd seen 1,000 times lately. The look that says, "Another confused old man." "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Carter?" she asked gently. "I don't have an appointment," I said, leaning in. I pulled my Marine coin out and placed it on the counter. "I have a right. I worked 43 years at the mill and served my country. My son has stolen my house, and my dog is at the pound. I am of sound mind, and I am telling you there is a crime being committed." A man in a suit standing by the coffee machine turned around. He looked at the coin, then at me. "Marine?" "First Division," I said, squaring my shoulders. He walked over. "I'm Colonel Reed. I had the legal assistance program here. Why don't you come into my office, Sergeant?" As I followed him, I looked back at the door. I saw a Golden Sunset van pull into the parking lot. They were looking for me.
Colonel Reed listened. He didn't interrupt, and he didn't look at his watch. I told him everything. The diverted checks, the orange sticker on my door, the blue pills, and the conversation I'd overheard between Graves and the nurse. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. He tapped my marine coin on his desk. "Mr. Carter, what you're describing is a sophisticated form of elder abuse. If your son has temporary guardianship, he can legally move funds, but the intent to liquidate your assets while you're under medicated duress is a felony." "I just want my dog back," I said. My voice was small now. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me cold. "And I want to go home." Reed picked up the phone. "I can't get you home tonight. If I send you back now, they'll just lock you in a different room, but I can place you under VA protective custody. It means they can't touch you while we investigate." "How long?" I asked. "A few days, maybe a week." He got me a bed in the veterans wing. It was clean. The lights didn't flicker, and no one forced me to take blue pills. But as I lay there, I couldn't stop thinking about the Monday the nurse had mentioned, the day they were going to have me declared incompetent. The next morning, Reed came back. His face was grim. "Raymond, we have a problem. Your son has filed a kidnapping charge against Leo, the boy who helped you, and he's filed an emergency injunction. He claims you're in a psychotic break and that the VA is endangering you by not returning you to Golden Sunset." "He's fast," I said. "He's desperate," Reed replied. "He's already listed your house on a quick sale site. He needs that money fast. My guess? He's in deep with someone." I looked out the window. "What about Buster?" Reed looked away. "The pound has a 5-day hold policy, Raymond. Today is day 4. I felt a surge of cold fury. David was willing to kill my dog and put a kind boy in jail just to line his pockets. I stood up. I didn't feel 79. I felt like I was back in the trenches, the air thick with the smell of powder. "Colonel," I said, "I need to go to that hearing on Monday. I need to face my son in front of a judge." "It's risky," Reed said. "If the judge sides with him, you'll be sent back to Golden Sunset, and I won't be able to pull you out again. David has a high-priced lawyer. You have me." "Then we better get to work," I said. That night, I didn't sleep. I spent the hours writing down every detail of my life, every date, every boss's name, every medal I'd earned. I was building my defense. But at 3 a.m., a nurse walked in. She looked terrified. "Mr. Carter, there are 2 men at the security desk. They have a court order to take you back to Golden Sunset. They say the VA's protective custody has been overruled." I didn't run. There was nowhere to go. The 2 orderlies from Golden Sunset walked into my room. They were smiling. It was a cruel, toothy look. "Come on, Ray, time to go back. You gave us quite a scare." They grabbed my arms. They weren't gentle. As they marched me through the hospital lobby, I saw Colonel Reed. He was shouting at a man in a police uniform, brandishing a stack of papers, but the policeman just shook his head. "I'll be there on Monday, Raymond," Reed yelled as they shoved me into the back of the van. "Don't sign anything. Do you hear me? Don't sign anything." The doors slammed shut. Back at Golden Sunset, they didn't put me in room 302. They took me to a basement room. It was cold and damp with a single light bulb hanging from a wire. Administrator Graves was waiting. "You've been a very naughty boy, Raymond," she said. She held out a clipboard. "This is a voluntary transfer of deed. If you sign it, I'll tell the judge you had a moment of clarity and that you're fit to live in a less secure wing. If you don't, well, the doctor is waiting to give you a much stronger sedative, one that will make sure you don't say a word at the hearing." I looked at the paper. It was my life. The house Martha and I had picked out, the porch where we'd watched the sunsets. "Where is my dog?" I asked. Graves laughed. "Probably at the bottom of a black bag by now. Sign the paper, Raymond." I looked at the pen in her hand. My hand was shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of not wrapping it around her throat. I took the pen. I leaned over the table. I felt the orderlies move closer, watching the tip of the pen touch the paper. I started to write, but I didn't write my name. I wrote 2 words in big, bold letters. "Go to hell." Graves's face turned a dark purple. "Fine. Have it your way. Nurse, bring the syringe." I felt the needle bite into my shoulder. I tried to fight it, but the world started to tilt. The light bulb turned into a swirling sun. I felt myself falling into a deep, dark hole where there were no houses, no dogs, and no Martha. The last thing I heard was Graves's voice. "Make sure he's out cold for the next 48 hours. We'll wheel him into court as a vegetable."
The world was a blur of gray light and muffled voices. I was in a wheelchair. My head felt like it was filled with lead, hanging heavy on my chest. I couldn't lift my arms. I couldn't even blink properly. "Your Honor," a voice said. It sounded like it was coming from a mile away. It was David's lawyer. "As you can see, Mr. Carter has suffered a catastrophic cognitive collapse. He is completely unresponsive. We ask that the temporary guardianship be made permanent and that my client be granted full authority to manage the estate." I tried to speak. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell the judge that I was in there, trapped behind a wall of drugs. But all that came out was a soft, wet wheeze. "This is heartbreaking," a woman's voice said. The judge. "Is there any representation for the respondent?" "Yes, Your Honor." Colonel Reed's voice. "I am here on behalf of Mr. Carter. The temporary guardianship is revoked immediately. David Carter, you are to be taken into custody pending further investigation. Golden Sunset is hereby placed under state receivership." I watched as the police approached David. He didn't fight. He just looked at me, a look of pure, concentrated hatred. "I hope you rot in that house alone," he spat as they led him away. I sat back in the wheelchair. I should have felt a victory. I should have felt justice. But all I felt was a vast, empty hole where my family used to be. I'd won my house, but I'd lost my son. Reed knelt down beside me. "It's over, Raymond. You're going home. My wife and we're going to help you get settled. We'll find a nurse you can trust." "The dog," I whispered. "Is he—" Reed bit his lip. He didn't answer right away. He looked at his watch. The hearing ran long. The pound, they closed an hour ago. Today was the 5th day. I felt the last of my strength drain away. I closed my eyes. The house in Gary would be dark. The refrigerator would be silent, and there would be no cold nose to greet me at the door. "Take me home," I said. As we pulled into my driveway, the sun was setting. The orange "unfit" sticker was still on the door, flapping in the wind. The house looked old. It looked tired, just like me. The silence that followed the recording was heavier than the drugs in my system. I felt the fog in my brain start to crack. The sheer heat of David's betrayal acted like an antidote. I slowly lifted my head. My neck muscle screamed, but I forced my eyes open. I looked across the room. David was sitting at the table, his face white, his hands trembling. He looked small, not like the powerful man who had thrown me in a van, just a scared, greedy boy. "David," I croaked. The word felt like a stone in my mouth. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Carter, can you hear me?" I looked at her. She had gray hair and kind eyes. I hear you," I said. My voice was a whisper, but it was mine. He's my son, but he's lost. Your Honor, Reed said, I have the police outside. They have a warrant for Administrator Graves and several members of her staff. This recording, combined with the bank records we've unsealed, proves a conspiracy of fraud and kidnapping. The judge hammered her gavel. The temporary guardianship is revoked immediately. David Carter, you are to be taken into custody pending further investigation. Golden Sunset is hereby placed under state receivership. I watched as the police approached David. He didn't fight. He just looked at me, a look of pure, concentrated hatred. I hope you rot in that house alone, he spat as they led him away. I sat back in the wheelchair. I should have felt a victory. I should have felt justice. But all I felt was a vast, empty hole where my family used to be. I'd won my house, but I'd lost my son. Reed knelt down beside me. It's over, Raymond. You're going home. My wife and we're going to help you get settled. We'll find a nurse you can trust. The dog, I whispered. Is he... Reed bit his lip. He didn't answer right away. He looked at his watch. The hearing ran long. The pound, they closed an hour ago. Today was the 5th day. I felt the last of my strength drain away. I closed my eyes. The house in Gary would be dark. The refrigerator would be silent, and there would be no cold nose to greet me at the door. Take me home, I said. As we pulled into my driveway, the sun was setting. The orange, unfit sticker was still on the door, flapping in the wind. The house looked old. It looked tired, just like me. Colonel Reed helped me into the house. He'd called the utility company and the lights were back on. The hum of the refrigerator was a comfort I didn't expect, but the silence was still there, lurking in the corners. I'll leave you some food in the fridge, Raymond, Reed said. He looked like he wanted to stay, but I waved him off. I needed to be alone. I sat at the kitchen table. I picked up the vial of Martha's insulin. It was warm now. Useless. I walked to the trash can to throw it away, but then I stopped. It was the last thing we'd touched together. I put it back on the table. I walked to the back door and opened it. The yard was overgrown. David hadn't mowed it. I looked toward the old oak tree where Buster used to sleep in the shade. I'm sorry, boy, I whispered to the empty air. Just then, I heard a sound. A low, rhythmic scratching at the bottom of the door. Then a whine. A long, mournful sound that I knew as well as my own name. I threw the door open. There stood Leo, the laundry boy. He was covered in dirt and his gray jumpsuit was torn. In his arms, he was holding a bundle of fur. I broke into the pound, Mr. Carter, Leo panted, his eyes wide. They were about to... I couldn't let them. I'm sorry if I got you in more trouble. He set the bundle down. Buster stood on his shaky legs, his tail giving one slow, uncertain wag. He sniffed the air, then bumped his head against my knee. I fell to my knees and buried my face in his fur. I cried then, really cried, for Martha, for David, for the 43 years at the mill, and for the boy with the bird tattoo who had risked everything for a man he barely knew. Leo stayed for a cup of coffee. He told me he'd lost his job at Golden Sunset, but Reed was going to help him find work at the VA. We sat in the kitchen, the lights on, the house warm. The final twist came 3 weeks later. Reed visited with a stack of papers. Raymond, they found David's offshore accounts. He didn't just steal your pension. He'd been skimming from Martha's life insurance for years. There's over $200,000. I looked at the money on the paper. It was a fortune, enough to move to a fancy condo, to buy a new car, to travel. Give it to Leo and the VA program for kids coming out of the system. You don't want any of it? Reed asked. I looked at Buster sleeping at my feet. I looked at the photo of Martha on the wall. I had my house. I had my pride. And I had the knowledge that I was still sharp enough to fight. "I have everything I need," I said. I walked onto the porch and sat in my old rocker. The Indiana wind was cold, but I didn't mind. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in colors of fire and steel. I was 79 years old. I was a Marine, and I was home.